It's not about some moral failing or innate weakness on your part. It's about normal human wiring, which propels you to fight, flight, flee, freeze, or freak out when your buttons are pushed, even if such a response is decidedly unhelpful. Hello and welcome to the Sunshine Parenting Podcast, where each week we talk about ideas for raising kids who become thriving adults. I'm your host, Audrey Monkey. I'm a summer camp director, writer, and speaker, and I've had the privilege of working with thousands of children, teenagers, young adult counselors, and parents over the past 3 decades. My husband, Steve, and I are raising 5 kids who currently range in age from 15 to 25. So my interest in raising kind, optimistic, self-reliant kids who become thriving adults is personal as well as professional. In episode 103, I'm chatting with Carla Naumberg. Carla is a writer, speaker, clinical social worker, and parenting coach. She's the author of 3 parenting books, including the one that we discuss in this episode of the podcast. The title includes a word that many parents don't want their children using. Therefore, we will not use the word in this episode. We will just replace it with the letter S. The title of Carla's book is How to Stop Losing Your S with Your Kids, a practical guide to becoming a calmer, happier parent. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and thanks so much for listening to the Sunshine Parenting Podcast. Well, I'm excited to welcome today Carla Naumberg to the podcast. Welcome, Carla.
Audrey, I'm so glad to be here.
So we first met, I think it was a couple years ago or a year and a half ago at Mom 2.0.
Yeah, we were sitting and we met through a summer camp connection.
Is that right?
Yeah, because I grew up in New Mexico and I think I went to Chile camps for a summer, and you know those folks.
Yes, I was sitting with Brooke Chile, and that's right. That's the connection. Okay, I remember that. And I remember we had a lot of it in common. We were talking about we were both at the time writing parenting books, and it was just so fun to connect. So we've been connected ever since, and I've been following your work, and you just have a lot going on. So why don't you first tell listeners a little bit about your background and what you do?
Sure. So I'm a clinical social worker, and after a pretty varied career in clinical social work, working outpatient with children and families, residential with children, I worked on a college counseling mental health center and a locked inpatient psychiatric unit. After my daughters were born, I settled into parent coaching. And since that time, I've also written 3 parenting books, and my 3rd one just came out.
Awesome. Okay, that's amazing. So tell me I really am intrigued by parent coaching, which I know is getting more common now. I interviewed another person who also does parent coaching. What does that look like? Do you go into people's homes, or do they come and talk to you, or what does that entail?
So it really depends on the person and how they want to structure it. It also depends on their background, because some parent coaches have a clinical background in social work or psychology, and some of them, they have a background that's maybe more based in education or something like that. But yes, some coaches do go into people's homes. Some coaches meet with parents in an office, like, you might meet with a therapist, and a lot of folks do coaching over the phone. And that's what I ended up doing, primarily for 2 reasons. One is I found it was much sort of easier for the parents. They could talk while a kid was napping. Who are we kidding? No, they could talk while they were at work, close the door and talk during their lunch hour, or squeeze in a call while they had a little bit of childcare. And I found that for me, because my husband, works in an office and he needs to go to the office every day, and I have a more flexible schedule, it was really useful for me to be able to work from home on days when there were snow days or sick kids or something like that, because I have 2 daughters. And the work we did was really around problem solving around parenting, strategizing, helping parents sort of create the relationship with their children and the home life and the dynamics that they wanted out of parenting.
That's amazing. So is that precede writing your books? Like, did your coaching kind of inform what you wanted to write about, or was this all simultaneous?
The first 2 books came first, and then I started the coaching practice, and then that coaching practice and my own personal experience really informed my 3rd book.
Okay, amazing. Well, let's talk about, your 3rd book that's brand new. It's just out. It's called How to Stop Losing Your S, we're going to call it, with Your Kids, a practical guide to becoming a calmer, happier parent. And who doesn't want to be a calmer, happier parent? And it seems like as I look at your other books too, there's sort of a theme to your work. What would you kind of describe if you had to summarize what your main message is to parents? What would that be, Carla?
So all these books are obviously about parenting, and I would say that they're all to some degree or another about mindfulness in parenting. Although in this third book is really meant for parents who are perhaps a little skeptical about mindfulness, or the general mindfulness vibe as it's sort of commonly discussed in our culture doesn't really work for them. This book is a lot snarkier, got some sarcasm, obviously has some profanity, but at the end of the day, it's really about how do we stay calm with our kids and not lose our tempers with them as often as we have been. So I would say, and the whole point of this, right? The whole point of mindful parenting is so that we can have a stronger relationship with our children and enjoy parenting more.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Well, I love just the format of your book. It's very quick read. So even for people who aren't big readers or who, normally read parenting books, I actually think also, it's funny, I feel this way about a lot of parenting books. It's also a guide for just general relationships, if you know what I mean. It's not just for your relationship with your kids. All of these strategies that you share in here also work with siblings, aging parents, spouses, coworkers. So it's interesting to me. I find that in my research, it's the same thing, like your relationship with your children. It's fraught with some additional things because you have all this like kind of caught up in it, because their behavior you feel like is a reflection of you. But in general, the same strategies that help you stay calm and respond more the way you want to with your kids also help with everyone else.
Absolutely. I mean, if you've ever, shot off a tweet or a text message that you probably shouldn't have, or snapped at an in-law, or bit your sister's head off at the Thanksgiving table or whatever, the strategies in this book are going to help you. And I think one of the big differences in this book from other parenting books, and also that hopefully will be particularly helpful for parents, is I think some parenting books out there really focus on changing our children's behavior. And obviously, how our children behave is important, and how we parent them can impact their behavior. And we want them to grow up to be, functional human beings who know how to unload the dishwasher and be polite and talk to strangers, all things you talk about in your book that I love so much. And when it comes to our own parenting behavior, though, it's really on us. That our job is to sort of take care of ourselves and figure out the strategies we need to do so that when our kids or our spouse or the random person on the internet who doesn't even know us is behaving in a problematic or annoying way, we can still stay calm, right? So it's really about focusing on us, because at the end of the day, that's all we can really control.
Absolutely. You mentioned a lot in the book, and I really like this. I'm just going to read this part from page 8. You say it's not about some moral failing or innate weakness on your part. It's about normal human wiring, which propels you to fight, flee, freeze, or freak out when your buttons are pushed, even if such a response is decidedly unhelpful. Many times in the book, you reiterate that you're not a bad person, you're not a bad parent, you're human. And here are some strategies to figure out how you can better manage your life, your kids, how your reactions to things. And even after reading this book, you're still going to sometimes lose your S once in a while.
Absolutely. And, it may seem a little bit like I'm beating the proverbial dead horse on this issue, but I can't tell you how many parents I have worked with, how many parents I know just from, life as a parent, chatting on the playground. They're my friends. And also from my own personal experience, the deep, deep shame that so many parents feel about the way they exploded their kids. And I think that shame can come from a lot of places. It may be connected to their own childhood experiences. It can be because we are raised in this culture where we're led to believe that some parents are perfect and it's just not us. And spoiler alert, no perfect parents out there, even the ones who make it look really good on Instagram, right? And the shame for some parents in talking about this is really overwhelming, and it's paralyzing, and it gets in the way of their ability to parent the way they want to. And so part of my goal in this book was to really normalize that every parent loses it with their kids sometimes, and to also educate parents that this doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It's just that parenting is really hard, really, really hard.
And life and managing it all is really hard. So you give so many good ideas in here you talk about owning your buttons and your triggers. Why don't you talk about buttons and this concept that you introduce about thinking about these buttons that our kids can push on us?
Yeah, so I use the idea, everybody talks about your kids pushing your buttons or your buttons being pushed. And I actually love that because I think it's a great metaphor for what's going on in our bodies and our nervous systems when we are triggered. So not to get all clinical and psychological on your listeners, but I define, triggered as anything that makes us more likely to lose our temper with our kids. That's all it is. So when we are triggered, we are in some kind of a heightened state. And it's really about our nervous system and this fight or flight reaction that we have, that even when it's a kid who we on some level know can't really hurt us, there is something about their behavior that is threatening to us on an emotional level, on a psychological level, and maybe even on a physical level, depending on our childhood, on our trauma history, on the amount at which we carry the, judgments of the world on our shoulders. And when our nervous system is ramped up like that, I tend to think of it as though our buttons get big and bright and red and super sensitive and really pushable by kids. And to any of you who've ever been in an elevator or anywhere near an elevator with a child, they see those buttons and not only do they want to push them, but they want to keep pushing them even after they're already lit up, right? And so the goal here is to not get our kids to stop pushing our buttons. I mean, yes, that would be a nice goal, but it's really not realistic. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to wait the next 10, 15 years for my kids to stop pushing my buttons before I stop losing it. So the goal of the book and what I talk about is how can we make our buttons smaller and dimmer and less sensitive so that when the kid comes around with their finger out looking for something to push, it's not going to be us.
That's amazing. I love that description. And I think it totally makes sense. I also think that what makes sense is that we all have different things that trigger us. It just as humans. And I love that thought of just stepping back and figuring out and kind of going back and doing some forensics. Like, when have I lost it? Like, what are the circumstances? What time of day is it? What's going on with me? What could be these things that are making my buttons bigger? I love this kind of self-reflection that you encourage in here. So let's talk about some of your key strategies for making our buttons smaller. What are some of the things that you find yourself recommending in the book and probably, I'm guessing, in your coaching as well?
Yeah, so some of these, just like our triggers can both be universal and unique, like a universal trigger for everyone is exhaustion. I don't know anybody who can stay patient with their children when they are sleep deprived and exhausted. And then, a unique trigger for someone, like for me, loud noises and a lot of noise is pretty triggering. I get kind of tense and wound up, whereas my husband, it doesn't bother him at all. So that's a unique trigger. So just in the same way that our triggers can be universal and unique, there are also universal and unique strategies for managing our triggers. So for pretty much everyone, sleep. You have to sleep. And I know that there are some parents who are probably somewhere between laughing and crying as they hear me say that, because they've got newborns or they've got, a toddler who's in some kind of awful sleep regression stage, or they've got a kid who just doesn't sleep. And so when you can't sleep, I've got a small section in the book about sort of how to function when you're exhausted, because that's absolutely a reality for all of us. But also some ideas in the book about how to get better at sleep, even if it's not perfect, and how to cut yourself a whole lot of slack when you're not getting the sleep you need. And rather than thinking that you should just be able to function and sleep is for when we're dead and you're just going to barrel through your day, it doesn't work. That's not reality. So how can you be really compassionate and kind with yourself and cut yourself some slack when you're not sleeping? So sleep is a big one. The other one I would say, a lot of these, Audrey, are things that people have heard of. They know what I'm going to say to them, right? I'm going to say, you got to move your body. You got to get exercise. This tension that we carry really lives in our body, and we have to get it out somehow, right? We have to get our endorphins going to calm us down. Exercise matters on a lot of levels. Getting time away from your kids, getting quiet time, getting time to do something fun. But a big one that I think most parents aren't even aware of, that I know you and I had discussed before the recording, is this idea that I bring up of single tasking, which is doing one thing at a time. So what I think many parents don't realize is that anytime we are multitasking or trying to do multiple things at once, we're actually triggering ourselves. And then if one of those things we're trying to manage happens to be our children, the likelihood that we're going to blow up, it's almost 100%. It's just too stressful. And the example that I think every parent can relate to is think about dinner time. So, you've got dinner on the stove and you're trying to stir the noodles because if your kids are like mine, they only want to eat noodles. And then your phone is maybe buzzing and lighting up with calls or text messages from your spouse or your boss or whoever it is. And then maybe you've got one kid at the dining room table nagging you for help with their spelling words, and then another kid in the bathroom asking you to come wipe their tushy. And you're trying to do all of it, and eventually somebody says something and you lose it, right? And so the goal there is, can you get to a place where you're really doing just one thing at a time? And look, my daughters are older, so it's getting easier, but I'm training them and training myself. And I will say, I'm cooking dinner. I can help you when I'm done. And sometimes I have to say that 4 or 5 times to them, but they're getting better at being patient, and I'm getting better at focusing on just one thing at a time. And my stress goes way down.
I love that. One of the things that really resonated with me in your book is when you talk about how you can be reading a story to your child and you've read it so many times that you can be thinking about something else. And I, during my younger parenting years when, we always read every night and we had all these things that were like kind of our routines, but it really was, I would be there physically, but there would be times when I'd be like, oh my gosh, I have these emails I need to answer. And after the kids go to bed, I have another, 2 hours of work. And I just remember that time, and I'm past that. Thank you, Lord. I'm completely, my kids are all grown now. I'm older though, too. So I actually need more sleep, which I think there's a reason why we're younger when our kids are younger. Because I look at one of our camp directors at my camp now, they have a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old. And I love this little 3-year-old. She is so much fun, but oh my gosh, I'm tired after just spending a couple hours with her. And so I do realize that I look back and go, wow, that was a tiring time. And I used to put my kids to bed and then do my next shift of work. And I did not get enough sleep. And I kind of just muddled through those years, just thinking that I had to just keep doing this. But I did oftentimes want to be more just I'm here, I'm 100% here. So even single thinking, I think is part of what, it's hard to do, but it's not just that you're doing more than one thing at once. It's you might be doing something with your kids, but you're worrying or thinking about something with work or something you need to get done. And that's hard to break. So what are some of your strategies for that when you're just kind of that thought process that's making you think about too many things at once?
Absolutely. So the first strategy is to realize, again, this isn't because there's something wrong with you, that you're an anxious, overworked, stressed out, hyper responsible, whatever person. This is just the human brain was meant to think. And it doesn't care if the thoughts it's thinking are useful or helpful. It just wants to think all the thoughts, especially if there are thoughts related to keeping you safe. And in this day and age, I think for many, although not all of us, for those of us for whom our physical safety is pretty assured, we're not worried about that as much. We tend to worry more about emotional and social safety. So the things like, have I answered those emails? So again, nothing wrong with you if your brain wanders when you're reading, Angelina Ballerina for the 27th time, or even the first time, right? I can read a book for the first time and my brain is a million miles away, right? And this is not awesome for a few reasons. One is reading to our children, or any time we're with our kids, is an amazing opportunity to actually connect with them. And if we're worried about how we're going to pay rent or fix the plumbing or the weird thing the other mom said on the playground or whatever it is, we're not with them, and our kids know. Just like we know, if we're at a meal with a friend or a spouse and they're totally checked out, you can tell. Even if they're looking right at you, they're not there. So, our kids kind of feel disconnected from us. That doesn't feel good to them. And then we come away from this moment that could have been kind of a pleasant moment with our children. And instead we've got this laundry list of annoying stuff we have to take care of, which increases our stress. So the way to get better at this is to think of it as a practice. And by a practice, I mean something that when you start out, you're really not very good at it. And then the more you do it, you actually get better at it. Just like your kids practice soccer or flute or whatever. And the idea is to notice, and I go into this in the book a lot, how we get better at this, to notice when our mind is wandering, and then to make a conscious decision to bring it back to this thing that we're doing. And sometimes you have to make that conscious decision 60 times in 60 seconds, and that's fine. That's the work. That's not you failing. That's you doing the work. And the cool thing about this is that when you practice noticing where your mind is going and bringing it back to the thing you're doing, whether it's drinking your coffee or stirring the noodles or reading to your kids, that's going to put you in a much better position to notice when you're about to lose your temper with them. And that is the thing you have to do if you're going to stop yourself. So when you can notice that your shoulders are getting tight, or your eyebrows and your forehead's all scrunched up and tight, or your breathing's, getting faster. Or for me, the thing I notice is I start to answer my daughters in these very clipped one-word answers. Yeah, no, okay. When I hear myself doing that, that's like my red flag. Like I'm about 30 seconds away from yelling at them. And so when you can notice that, you can make a choice to do something other than yell at your kids.
Hi, Sunshine Parenting listeners. I want to take a moment to talk to you about my new book, Happy Campers: 9 Summer Camp Secrets for Raising Kids Who Become Thriving Adults. I've really appreciated some of the feedback that I've received from early readers, including my most recent Amazon review by Mary, her title, Delightful Practical Parenting Book. In Happy Campers, Audrey Monkey provides families with all the tools they need to bring the well-documented benefits of camp into their daily lives at home. By exploring the intentional mindsets and practices behind the magic of camp, Happy Campers shares specific ways we can help our children develop confidence, connection, and well-being. Whether the reader is looking for simple strategies to put into place right away or is eager to explore the core values that shape their family priorities, this book delivers. Importantly, Audrey writes with the joy and enthusiasm of a dynamic and encouraging camp leader who is there to remind us of the supports and experiences that matter most for our kids' long-term well-being and to highlight the importance of having fun along the way. For more information about Happy Campers, visit happycampersbook.com. So you have so many fun acronyms in here, like BURP. Talk about, I'm like, there's fart and burp and all these things. So remind me again, I liked the BURP one. What does BURP stand for?
So I feel like I should explain these acronyms to your listeners who are like, what is
sounds
going on
good.
in this crazy
Yes.
book? I just want parents to remember that we don't have to take this stuff so seriously. Like it's important and it matters, but we can also be silly and ridiculous. And burps and farts are things that happen to every human being, no matter how much we try to hide them, just like losing it with our kids. So, but burps, I must say, I am particularly proud of that one because if we talk about our buttons, BURP stands for button reduction practice. So these things we need to do that are basically like preventing the meltdowns, making it much harder for our kids to actually push our buttons. So I feel pretty good about that acronym.
I thought it was great. I was excited when I got to it in the book. And you have a lot of the book is actually these burps, these button reduction practices, because you move into the chapters, let's see, 4 through 7 are your different burp practices. Chapter 4 is single tasking, which we already talked about. Chapter 5 includes sleep, which we already talked about, but it also includes support and self-compassion. Do you want to touch on either of those?
Yeah, look, they're both super important. And we talk a lot about how it takes a village and we all need support. And then what I found with a lot of parents, and I found myself doing this, is that when things get really chaotic because a kid gets sick or somebody gets injured or just whatever, something happens that's super stressful, what families these days tend to do is like hunker down, circle the wagons, kind of disappear for a while, and then only show up when things are better. And this is, you're nodding. Audrey and I are looking at each other and I see her nodding at me. So this is a problem for a couple reasons. One is it perpetuates this idea that nobody ever struggles in life and parenting. Because back in the good old days, before we had things like air conditioning and everybody's windows were open, you would hear people yell at their kids or you would know if people were struggling. And now we can really kind of hide it more. And so it, again, perpetuates this idea, which is total BS, that none of us ever struggle or have a hard time. The other thing is that we don't get the support we need, and there's no shame in asking for support and help. So, one of the things I do in the book is I really want to break it down for people. What kind of support do we need? And there's different kinds of support we get. And I'll leave a little bit to the reader. They have to go buy the book if they want to get all the juicy details. But really, I get very specific and concrete about the kinds of support we need and what it looks like and how to find it and how it can make parenting so much easier.
Absolutely. I mean, and I think it's so funny because I'm sure you get this a lot too, especially since you do parent coaching and you have your clinical psychologist or social worker and all that. I have people who will say to me, oh, I told my kids that you said to do this. And so they listened because you said it, meaning me. But then I'm like, yeah, my own kids though, don't listen to me. So it's like even people who've researched and know a lot about working with kids and, kind of best practices and communication with kids, still with our own kids, none of us is perfect, nor are days going perfectly or smoothly. And I really, when I was nodding so much when you were talking, because I was thinking it's very similar to when people have mental health issues, especially depression, and they close in and isolate. And even people who love them, who offer help, they'll say, no, don't come over, don't help me. I feel like it's kind of a similar thing with families and everyone. And we all have times when we're struggling, whether it's individually or with our families or just stressors or work. And you need some outlets, places where you can just say, hey, I need some help today. I'm really, and I love that you talk about that and you give a lot of very, very applicable good things, and some of which are free, cost nothing, and some are more like hiring professionals and that kind of thing. So I really love that. So chapter 6, you talk about simplifying, and you give some different, and these are kind of remind me of all the mindfulness things we've all been learning, but just, all of us need more of this kind of quiet breathing, break from our screens, all this stuff than what we're usually getting now. So I love that. And then chapter 7, you talk about space from your kids. So I think this is a great segue. In our emails, as we were setting this up, you shared that your girls, who are now 9 and 11, you said?
Yes.
Went to camp. Was this their first time going to camp this summer?
This was their first time going to sleepaway camp. They've been going to day camps for a few years now. So they spent 2 weeks at sleepaway camp, and, they did all the things and made all the friendship bracelets and, went kayaking and swimming and had a great time. But that's not so interesting to me. Like, whatever. They went and did that and it was good for them. The very interesting part was my experience. So my husband and I, while they were away, we spent a few days. We rented a house with some other parents who are friends of ours who had also dropped their kids at camp. And we just went hiking every day and then played games and did all the things that you can do without kids. And it was amazing. Nobody nagged each other the whole time. There was no whining. It was mind blowing. So that was awesome. But the other thing is, so then my husband and I came home and we basically settled into our normal routine, which was going to work. Right. And then exercising and having some dinner and watching some Netflix and then going to bed. And the thing that struck me is, so this was the longest I've been away from my daughters ever since they were born. I've been away from them maybe 1 or 2 nights, for an anniversary or something, but that only happened once or twice. And so for, 2 weeks, what really struck me is, oh my gosh, I can get so much more done, and my life feels logistically so much easier when they're gone. And yes, I miss them, and it was nice to have a break, and I think they appreciated the break from me too. And it really shed a little perspective on how much we parents balance and how much we deal with, and quite frankly, how hard it is to be really involved in raising your children. The time we spent getting them up in the morning, and even, my kids, they get themselves dressed. They can make their own breakfast. They can help pack their lunches. They are really independent. And yet it is so much time and energy every day. And it's time and energy I want to spend. I am choosing to be an involved parent, and that works for me. But shoot, it's hard. It is hard, Audrey. And so I think I came away from these 2 weeks having a lot more compassion for myself with that perspective. Being it's okay if I lose it sometimes. It's okay if I get stressed sometimes. It's okay if I'm behind on my work deadline sometimes, because I'm actually doing this really hard thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's interesting. There's some research. They're about halfway through a 5-year study. It's out of the University of Utah. And they were initially studying the impact of summer camp experiences in terms of kids' development, how it's helping with sort of college readiness, career readiness, that type of thing. And they're finding some interesting, unique benefits of summer camp experiences, specifically in kind of interpersonal relational skills that kids reflecting back, or adults, young adults reflecting back, will say that they uniquely learned some of these skills because of camp, because of being at camp and being in that setting that's very focused on community relationship. But the interesting thing that they're finding that was unexpected is the benefits parents are saying that they get from sending their kids to camp. And part of it, and I don't know if this resonates with you, is about having a week or 2 or more where you're not spending all that emotional energy worrying about your kids, because you feel like you're sure that someone else is doing that for you, and how nice that break is, and how it also helps married couples reconnect, have a little more time with each other. You mentioned like playing games or just watching a TV show that you want to watch that's maybe not appropriate for your kids or whatever, like there's just that you kind of, once you have kids, it's like everything you have to like make every decision around them. Like, oh, well, I would love to go to this fancy dinner, but that's too long of a dinner to sit at with a little kid. So I'm not going to go do that. So, but just that, so that time to reconnect or spend time with friends or have a little more time for a hobby is really good for the parents' well-being too. So I was excited that you mentioned that you felt that a little bit. And I wonder if it's a little bit of that, especially in this era where often parents feel like they're supposed to be tracking their kids' daily assignments. And some parents track their kids, like every text they send, every comment they post and that kind of thing. It is a huge burden, I think, for parents, especially those trying to just monitor. And that break for a couple of weeks of just like, okay, I just kind of can take care of me and my job, my life for a few years. I'm sure is that part of it that you kind of you had this like break from sort of the emotional worries of thinking about your kids?
100%. I trusted the camp directors. I knew there was a problem. They'd be in touch and I could just let it go. And did everything go as I would have run it at camp? Of course not. My younger daughter, she's hilarious. She has this very long, thick hair, which we cut off for camp because she can't manage it herself. And she came back from camp and said they had very short showers and she didn't have enough time to do a full shower every night. So, Audrey, you're going to die. Listen to her strategy. The first night, she washed her hair. The second night, she conditioned her hair. And the third night, she washed her body. And I was like, wow, that is like a terrible plan. Like you not just, conditioning your hair without washing it. Like it's such a bad plan. And yet all I can do is laugh because it's not my problem. And, my wish for parents, and I write about this in the book, is that we can get a little bit more of that like distance and perspective and laughing it off, even when our kid is still in our home. Because I think that the amount of tension and stress that we carry and this need to manage every aspect of our kids' lives and that it all has to be perfect absolutely contributes to the extent to which we lose our temper with our children. And when we can just sort of say, and you talk about this, Audrey, so beautifully in Happy Campers, okay, well, what are you going to do about it? I can't remember the exact phrase you use, but you tell those great stories about that one girl who left the dress at home that was meant for the funeral. And the mom kind of said, what are you going to do about it? And the daughter came up with a solution, and this idea that we can sort of trust our kids to fail, trust our kids to make mistakes, and know that obviously if it's something life-changing or horrible, we'll step in, but otherwise they learn how to deal with it. And so like, is it awesome that my daughter only washed her body once every 3 days at summer camp? Like, not so much, but does it matter? Not at all. And so I think one of the other gifts of summer camp that really relates nicely to my book is helping parents get that headspace that we need, even when our kids are with us.
Absolutely. And I think also the other benefit is because your kids have been away and your daughter figured out, her own method and got herself relatively clean, even without you supervising, now that she's home, you can kind of let her take a little more autonomy for that and figure out what works and realize that the world will not end if, she doesn't get conditioner every night. And I think that's part of it. We sometimes get these things stuck in our heads that everything's so important when sometimes some of these details are not, like you said, they're not life-threatening. And giving our kids that sense of autonomy is so important so that they feel like they can do stuff. Kids tell me all the time that one of the things that they've learned at camp is all the things that they can do for themselves, because all they needed was the opportunity to figure things out. So even just like at my camp, it's a buffet line. So it's not family style. So the kids get to pick from a whole bunch. There's a salad bar, there's the pasta bar, there's like all these options, fruit available, all this stuff. They get to decide for themselves. And for some of them at the beginning, it's kind of like, wait, no one's going to tell me like exactly like what to put or how much to put of each thing. The counselors are of course encouraging them like, hey, you might want to have something else besides a bagel and a waffle for breakfast. Like you might want to add a little fruit, but it's really amazing because I think so many kids just kind of have waited it's so much easier to have someone just tell you, okay, just do this, eat that, do this. And even as adults, sometimes we just almost wish for that. Just tell me what to do, whatever, I'll just eat whatever you tell me or whatever. I don't want to have to think about this. And we can inadvertently raise our kids to be waiting for us to just tell them what to do. I have a child going to college, and he is he did very well in school. He graduated second in his class, gave this beautiful speech, and he still will text my husband and me asking so, how do I register for these classes? And so we just respond, oh, well, read through that email. You tell us what you figure out, because he would love it if I just said, oh, let me just log in onto that email for you and figure it out for you, because obviously I'm pretty good at that. I've done it many times myself when I was in college. So I think, some kids will be very easily letting their parents keep doing stuff. But I think then you get into your rut, which you talk about in the book, is when you find yourself doing all these things, that is when we kind of lose it. And at some point we explode. We're like, why am I doing this for you? You're 18 years old, And so I think it's a lot. I agree with all of your points in the book that just first, don't worry so much about the details of your children's behavior. Start first with what buttons are they pushing on you? What are little tiny changes that you can make that just might make you be a little more patient, a little more able to respond in a way that you want to when your kids do crazy stuff?
Absolutely. And, when generally speaking, I find that parents are not so interested in learning more how to take care of themselves. That feels self-indulgent. It feels like it's not the point. They're too busy with work and their kids and their lives and volunteer and whatever. They don't want to hear that. And when I frame it to parents as this is the stuff you have to do if you don't want to lose it with your kids, and we frame it as a benefit for the child, then the parents are more interested in that. And so to parents, I just want to say, think about it however you need to think about it. But you are, at the end of the day, going to be a much better parent. You're going to enjoy parenting more when you can find the time and the space to take care of yourself. And you're modeling, especially, I would say, for girls, especially for the moms and the girls, we're really modeling it is okay to make yourself a priority. And that is something that women in our culture are traditionally not taught. I think that's starting to shift. But it is okay to say to someone else, I can't help you with it right now because I'm taking care of myself. And so I really want my daughters to see me doing that. And so there are times when I will say, hey, you know what? You guys take care of yourselves. I'm going downstairs for 20 minutes on the elliptical, or I'm going out for a walk. You can come with me or not. And if you choose not to come with me, guess what? You don't get your screens, but you can read your books, you can play Legos, whatever. So I think it's really important to start to shift our mindset that we are worthy of taking care of ourselves, if for no other reason than it means we'll be yelling at our kids a whole lot less often.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, this is a great place to end. There's so much more in your book, but like I said, I highly encourage people to read it. It's called How to Stop Losing Your S with Your Kids, a practical guide to becoming a calmer, happier parent. And it's just brand new. It's just out. So it's available now. And where else can people find your work, Carla, if they want to read your blog or get your newsletter, all that good stuff?
Yep. They can just go to my website. It's carlanaumberg.com.
Awesome. And I'll put a link in the show notes. Thanks so much for being with me today, Carla. This has been so much fun, and we'll have to do it again sometime.
Thanks, Audrey. I had a great time, and thank you for writing such a fabulous parenting book. I love Happy Campers.
Thanks so much for that endorsement. Appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Sunshine Parenting Podcast. I enjoyed chatting with Carla, and I hope you enjoyed our conversation as well. As always, you can find notes, links, and additional resources about the topics we discussed on my website at sunshine-parenting.com. Just search for episode 103. Each week, I send out a Sunshine Parenting email with links to my most recent podcast episode, blog posts, and other resources and ideas that I've found to help raise thriving kids. If you'd like to start getting my email, simply visit my website at sunshine-parenting.com and sign up.
This podcast is a proud member of Parents on Demand, a network of high-quality shows for families just like yours. Download our free network app on Apple and Android and listen to your favorite episodes on the go.